Welcome back to EdLab. Today's question: what do driving in rush hour traffic, a denied debit card at checkout, and teaching have in common? The answer: high levels of stress. But according to today's guest, while two of those experiences are temporary, for teachers, especially novice ones, experiencing overwhelm daily is a common experience. So what can be done to help? EdLab is a podcast of the University of Virginia School of Education and Human Development, where we talk to the people behind the school's transformative research, innovative teaching, and thriving partnerships. And in each episode, we aim to demystify some of the big questions being asked in education, policy, health, and human services. I'm your host, Audrey Breen. Let me start by saying that last is definitely not least. Today is the final episode in Season 1 of EdLab, and I'm so excited to talk with special education professor Michael Kennedy. Michael has been on the UVA faculty since 2011, but before he began his career as a professor, Michael was himself a struggling learner and then an overwhelmed novice teacher. Now, he and his lab are leveraging generative artificial intelligence to create innovative ways to reduce the overwhelming mental load many teachers carry. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me, Audrey. Good to see you.
All right. We have been starting these conversations with a question just to sort of learn a little bit about your journey. How did you get here?
Perhaps the most unlikely of journeys.
Yeah.
My father, to this day, when he runs into my old teachers at the grocery store in the town that I grew up in, he still lives in, they'll say, "Oh, how's the family? How's Michael doing?" And he'll say, "Oh, he's a professor at the University of Virginia." And old teachers will say, "What do you mean?" Like, a professor of what exactly are you talking about? That's not my recollection. I was a struggling learner. I'm a professor of special education, and I think deeply about students with disabilities, those who struggle, and I think about my own academics. I did fine in social studies. Because that's what I cared about. I ran cross country and track, so I cared deeply about that.
Yes.
But when it came to mathematics, science, other applied topics, I really didn't do well. And I only got to go to a 4-year undergraduate college because I ran so fast.
Really?
Yes. And then when I got to college, I went to be a high school social studies teacher. That's what I thought I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And even then, I struggled. And I had the access to the mentoring within the athletic program, but still, you know, I think my final undergrad GPA was probably like 2.2.
Yeah.
And I got out and, okay, what am I going to do? I was ambitious to teach, but, you know, my transcript didn't look like much.
Right.
And I ended up at a charter school in New Jersey. And I ended up in Jersey City, New Jersey. And on the first day of school, it is 28 inner city kids and me. Just, where's the teacher?
Yeah.
When will she arrive?
Right.
Because these kids are looking at me like I'm it, and that's not going to be it. And so I did 2 years there.
Yeah.
I learned all kinds of things, mostly that I was not qualified in any way to teach 4th grade and 6th grade. And this plays into the work that I do now, recognizing that we put teachers, like I was, into the way of the children who have the most substantial needs with the least possible preparation. I then moved. So I got a job at a small Christian school, private Christian school.
Okay.
I'm not the most religious guy on the planet, but they wanted to hire me and I needed a job. So I worked there for a year. In 2nd grade, I see I'm getting further away from what I thought I was going to do, high school social studies. But that year was renewing and revival in a way. Well, then my then girlfriend now wife of 20 plus years, Maureen, graduated the year after me. She's an occupational therapist. She took a job in Delaware, in Dover. And so I started to look for a job between where I was and where she was.
Yeah.
And found Middletown High School, because it's in the middle. And I went the first day and said, hey, I'm looking for a job. I'd like to be in social studies. And they basically said, well, we don't have any social studies jobs, but you know what we need is special education. Would you sign on like as a long-term sub to do that? By the way, it was September 11th, 2001.
No kidding.
Yes. This is just an interesting rando fact on that. And I said, well, it's a job and money, so that sounds great.
Yep.
And again, least qualified in the way
really
of the most needy students. And yet, being back in the high school around adolescence, and with these, now I have 3 years of teaching experience at the lower level, but 3 years of just being, let's call it a grown-up.
Sure, yes.
Those that knew me at the time would debate that. But, like, I get it. And I was teaching content I knew about. That was one of the keys.
Right.
So I was doing social studies just for this specific population.
Yep.
And I was in some other classrooms as well. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to have some success.
Yeah.
And I could see the students are learning. I'm making connections with them and developing into a professional.
Yeah.
Whereas, and I'm still only 24, 25 years old at this point. And so I did 6 years there of this. And during that time, I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I am not qualified. So I went and got my first master's in educational technology, because I was really interested in tech. Like, if you look at the tech portfolio of my research, it starts right there. And then I said, okay, I need to get some special ed training. I'm going to be in this field. So I went up to the University of Delaware, and they said, hey, you don't need to do this. You could just come into our doctoral program. And I said, I really want this credential. Yeah. I think it's really important to go through a real program, because I want to work in a program like this. Right. I want to teach teachers. I want to do research, as I understood it at the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to do this. And they said, we respect that. We'll see you back here, when you're done in 18 months or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Well, during my program, I learned all about these things called learning strategies and content enhancements and other things, all research being conducted by this gentleman by the name of Dr. Don Deschler from the University of Kansas. And so I wrote Don just a fan email. Like, hey, I think your work is great. I'm a teacher in Delaware. I'm thinking about a doctorate maybe in 5 years or so. Well, he writes back, the busiest man I've ever met.
Really?
The busiest man I've ever met. Writes back in 10 minutes. And says, hey, I've got money to support a doctoral student, and if you're interested, I'd like to talk to you about it. Did 4 years there, and that's where the pivot. So I moved from when I was in high school and all of elementary, all of high school, all of undergrad. Just everything I did was a struggle academically. Because I could read, but the comprehension struggled with. This is a very common profile we see in students. And I was just immature, I think, when it comes down to it. But then years of doing and had the perseverance and just the right luck of mentors at the right time, the right opportunities, the right, just principals who could see the promise, that vision they had, and faith. Was enough to sustain these early years where I could mold into somebody serious. And then at Kansas, okay, I'm really good at this. Like, there's parts of this, bringing new ideas and bringing this personal understanding of struggle made a really big difference to sort of weaponize why I want to do this.
One of the things you've talked about is really preparing teachers. Can you talk a little bit about what we are asking teachers? There have been conversations online. I see it in my Instagram feed personally about this catchphrase of mental load. How has your work really uncovered some of that? And what are some questions you're asking around that right now?
Yeah. Two scenarios for you.
Yeah.
Picture them both, that you've done both of these things.
Yeah.
Scenario one, you are taking your children to Nationals Park.
Okay.
So think about relative to our roads in Charlottesville.
Yes.
So you're driving into Washington,
Okay.
D.C. You've got a very specific time you're trying to be there.
Yep.
There's never not traffic.
Right.
You're splitting your attention, looking at the GPS,
Yep.
whatever the lady on the phone says you're going to
That's
do.
right. Yes.
And it starts raining.
Yep.
And you're really not quite sure. And the kids are in the back. They're making a lot of noise.
Yes.
Your husband's next to you saying, I think we ought to go this
Right.
way. And how do you feel just when these kinds of scenarios happen? You could just feel your blood pressure
Exactly.
rising, overwhelmed. And the other scenario is, think about the last time you tried to make a purchase and the website or the clerk said declined.
Right.
And how do you feel when that happens?
Really frustrated.
Frustrated. Yes. If it happens with another person, at the grocery store, it's sort of it's embarrassment. It's a combination of embarrassment. It's shock,
right?
Bewilderment. Like, wait a minute,
what is happening?
Like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
In both situations, are these feelings that you crave?
Oh gosh, no.
Of course, no.
Right.
Right. You will do anything.
Correct.
To avoid them. I will, if I'm going to DC and I'm not comfortable with those roads and I'm going to Nats Park, I'm going at least an hour before I think I need to be there.
For sure.
So I can just take my time. If I need to go the long way, I'll do it.
Yep.
I'll avoid that feeling.
Yes.
When it comes to buying things online, you double and triple check.
Yep.
Check the account. If there's been fraud, I've got every fraud monitoring that known to man, because that's when it happens these days.
Yep.
Unlike my Jersey days where it happened because there really wasn't any money in the account. In both instances, we as adults we do well in our respective positions, and we just find ways to avoid these unwanted feelings of frustration, of embarrassment, of just being overwhelmed, overmatched.
Yep.
And that feeling is what many teachers experience every single day as they go into their classrooms.
Right.
This is when we've got a teacher who's been hired off the street.
Yep.
We had so many teachers retire and leave during and post-COVID. Who are we going to replace them with? We're going to replace them with good-intentioned people who are presently alive, who have a bachelor's degree and can qualify for a provisional or an emergency teaching license. And that is what we've done. And these folks, as well-intentioned and motivated as they are, they're getting this feeling of driving into DC or their checking account being zeroed every day, and potentially multiple times per day as classroom management issues flare up, as they're asked to teach content they don't know particularly well, as they're using evidence-based practices. And so all of that adds into this, I am overloaded. And then teachers don't only have the school-related, they have all the anxieties we do because they have their own children who are struggling. They have their own family members who are sick. They may be sick themselves. We carry all of these anxieties, and it just adds to this feeling of being overwhelmed. And then it's so easy to then just kick the desk over. And that happens in schools. And so as teachers leave, this is one of the big reasons why. And so in my work with my team on the Stormed Lab here at UVA, we're always thinking about how can we deliver to teachers, inexperienced for sure, but even the experienced ones, because this happens to everybody. It happens less as you're experienced. Because what happens with new teachers is the first time something unwanted happens, it's the first time. So in thinking about how can we create teaching materials, learning materials, we're trying to lower that cognitive overload for teachers to make it easier for them to succeed. Now, I haven't even talked about the students with disabilities.
Yeah.
So we have this, right? The adults have the cognitive overload,
Right.
which leads us to make poor decisions.
Yeah.
It leads us to not implement evidence-based or high-leverage practices as intended. That's on our side.
Yep.
But students have this exact same overload happening, except it's even easier. And this is especially true for kids with disabilities. It's especially true for multilingual learners, kids, who are learning English for the first time here in American schools, and others who struggle, who have just home lives that don't lend themselves.
Right.
So the cognitive overload for them comes again constantly during the day because, okay, now it's time to learn about mitosis.
Right.
What's that?
Right.
That's a made-up word
Yep.
that I've never heard before, and I've as it turns out, made it quite far in my career without knowing what it is. But so when this happens for kids, and then they go to the next period and they learn about the word revolution.
Yep.
But think about the word revolution. Well, that means something different if you're in science or language arts or mathematics.
Right.
And has 5 different meanings in history.
Oh my gosh.
And so we pile, and we only have so much available cognitive load at any time.
Yep.
The human brain's resilient. So if I empty out that account and I get overloaded, I'll snap back.
Yeah.
And we as adults who are resourced and resilient, we snap back fast and we're motivated to do so.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But kids don't always.
Yeah.
They haven't learned that resiliency. They haven't developed those skills. When they get overwhelmed, they just shut down. The head goes to the desk.
Right.
Or they do something that will get them removed.
Right.
Kick over the desk or something like that. I'd rather be thrown out than feel this way.
Yeah.
Because we know how we feel.
Yes.
And we avoid these tasks.
You don't want it in your body. Yes.
Kids don't want it either. And it's really the same way.
Yeah.
So that's another long-winded way to come around to say, I'm always thinking about these most vulnerable amongst us, which are the teachers, especially those that are new and out of area, and how can we scaffold for them tools that can help make their job easier, because their job is ridiculously hard.
Yes. And
for students, how can we put success in their way to help lower their load too, and give them the coaching and supports they need for when they do get overwhelmed, because it's inevitable.
Right.
This is not an unavoidable occurrence. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of what happens when it does.
Yeah.
Is the issue.
Can you give us some examples of some of the scaffolding that you're thinking about and studying, exploring, what those look like?
So we just finished a project called Project S4. It was very thoughtfully funded by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Ed Programs.
Okay.
We said to them, we're going to work with inclusive middle school science teachers, which means science teachers who teach kids with disabilities.
Got it.
Which is all of them.
Yep.
We're going to give to them instructional materials in the way of PowerPoint slides.
Yep.
Editable slides that use a very specific learning theory that we subscribe to, the cognitive theory of multimedia learning, which is based in cognitive load, and says, let's use key images and a little bit of text.
Got it.
And no extra info. Just, this is the one thing you need to know.
Yes.
Get out.
Yes. Okay.
Here's the thing.
I'm here for this.
Get out. Keep it simple.
Yep.
That's the idea. And then you can build on that.
Got it.
That's for first exposure.
Yep.
Learn this. Get some kind of what we call schema in long-term memory to understand it, something to attach to, and then you can get more sophisticated, because in middle and high school, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of success with that. So we would train teachers on how to use these. We would give them flexibility to say, you don't like that picture, change it.
Yep.
You don't like that definition we wrote, change it.
Yep.
You don't like the example we gave, change it, no problem.
Yep.
But the practices is what matters.
Yes, right.
They agreed. We had a lot of success. We saw teachers make huge gains in their implementation of evidence-based practice and corresponding learning gains for students with disabilities, and all students, actually.
Yeah, that's great.
Then the project ended, and we said, boy, we'd really like to continue this work, but we want to go to lower grades, and we'd love to go to mathematics.
Yeah.
And what if, because it takes a long time to make these slides.
Yes.
We have team members whose entire job it can take 3 hours, 4 hours for one.
Really?
And they're great.
Yes, right.
We've got, hundreds of them, and they're really good, and people use them all around the country and world.
Yeah.
We're very proud of that. But what if generative artificial intelligence has gotten to the point where I could train it to push a button or two, and I could generate the same thing, give or take, in seconds?
Yep.
Is that real? Well, we collaborated with Dr. Adong Zhang, who's a professor here in computer science, and she said, "Oh, it's possible." Oh, it's possible.
That's a great answer.
So I like her a lot. So we wrote a new proposal to OSEP, Office of Special Ed Programs, and said, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing, but we're going to do it with this now.
Yeah.
And we're going to go down into elementary, and we're going to start doing mathematics as well as science. What do you say? And they said, here's your new grant.
Oh, congratulations.
So thank you. So my answer is technology supports are a terrific answer to this, because we know when teachers have good materials in front of them to use, they will.
Yeah.
They will. And what I love, though, is the veteran teachers who say, oh, I've got my own stuff already, and they do.
Yeah.
And it's good stuff. But they can see what we're up to. Like, oh, I like this piece. I don't like that piece. I like this piece. But they'll take the pieces they do like, add it to what they're already doing, and then we get to learn.
Oh, that's
because
cool.
we don't know everything, right?
Right.
So we see these interesting implementations and permeations and iterative development, we call it in the biz.
Yep.
And that's how we push forward. So if you look at our materials today versus when I first came here in 2011, it's the same stuff.
Yeah.
And yet they look completely different thanks to this development. The other thing is, as I always say, we just want to focus on a few things.
Yeah.
New teachers, the universe of teaching practice is infinite. There's so many, even the high leverage practices, which we've talked about before.
Yeah.
There's 22 of them.
Right.
You're not going to learn 22 different practices. Even in our, we've got a great teacher ed program here, undergrad and masters.
Yeah.
It's hard to learn that many practices and be ready to implement them across the infinite universe of kids and their needs and the different curriculum, different grade levels, different content areas. So if I can learn 3 or 4 key practices, we call them pillar practices, then you've got something to start with.
Got it. It's like the slides.
It's a scaffold to say, learn this, get good at this.
Yep.
And then on top of that, you can start to build.
Add to it. You mentioned, the evolution of your work is due, both as a result of feedback you're getting from the teachers in the schools and also your colleagues here at UVA. Can you talk a little bit about partnerships? This is something that we return to in these conversations often because the work is so connected to other people. So can you say a little bit more about what partnerships look like, how you go about building them, and how they contribute to your work?
Yeah, two key things. So there's the collaborations we have here.
Yes, right.
Which is on the development side. And Dr. Zhang is a good example.
Yeah.
I don't know her. She wrote to me.
It's the best.
It's the kind of thing that happens at a place like the University of Virginia.
Yes.
She was writing a proposal for an agency that I don't generally write proposals for, but it had an education component. She had seen in the UVA Today an article you wrote about our first AI-focused grant and said, okay, here's a guy in education who's doing AI, quote unquote, doing AI, and I'm going to write to him and see if he'll be our education expert on our proposal.
That's great.
And I said, okay.
Sure.
Okay. Sure. So I helped her with that, met a few members of her team. And then when it came time to write our revised proposal I just told you about, I called her and said, would you come onto our team? Could we get a little bit of your time to write some of this proposal? But then if we get funded, do this stuff. And she said, absolutely, let's do it. And
that is a great story.
Yeah, and that's what I really like about a place like this.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. But my true answer to this is our partnerships with schools. Yes. They're the ones day in, day out, kids in front of them, parents in front of them, other family members in front of them, doing God's work, if you'll allow. Yeah. That's really matters out there. And we are their partner.
Yeah.
They are the ones that
Yeah.
can say, we're having these issues. We
Yep.
can identify, with their, they use their data and their other data sources to say, we need support in reading or,
Right.
phonics or mathematics, computation or vocabulary and
Yeah.
secondary, whatever it is.
Yep.
And they'll then reach out to faculty here at UVA, other places, and say, hey, we're looking for these kinds of things. And that's what I really like about being in the position that we're in, because then we can say, oh, I know a lot about that. In fact, I have a new grant, or we could write a proposal and we can work on that together. Or I don't know a thing about that.
Right.
But guess who does?
Let me connect you. Yep.
Mandy Rispoli.
Yes.
Bill
Yes.
Theory.
Yep.
We can connect. And sometimes it's someone somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because it's something we just don't do
Yeah.
here. But that's the partnership that really matters, is recognizing in the schools with these leaders, what is it that is needed? How can we be of assistance? Because when we just roll in on the horse, it's usually white, and say, we've got these great things for you. Here it is. Start using this and test it.
Yeah.
It's that's a model. I mean, people do that, but it works much, much better to say, what do you need?
Right.
How could these ideas fit within it? And that's where the real innovation can come.
I love that reframe of we are their partners. I love that. We are, nearing the end of the conversation, and I have ended all of these with the same question. I'm curious, if we were to meet again in 10 years and continue the conversation, what do you hope to know then that you don't know now?
Well, I hope our AI overlords haven't decided we're no longer necessary as a species and cast us aside like Skynet.
Let's hope for that.
Let's hope. Science fiction brainstorming aside, I would really like that the field of education and the field of special education will have re-solidified itself in this time. We had this once in a lifetime event that really overturned a lot of just people's priorities, what school meant and what it meant to people changed really rapidly in ways none of us have ever seen, nobody could have predicted. And we've got a changed teaching force, but we have all the same assessments, all the same standards, all the same structures, and yet everything else around it seems to have shifted. And so in 10 years, I think a recalibration will have had time to come. So we can consider, okay, if this is going to be the teaching force, is going to be more transient than it was in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, and even, more recently than that, how can we prioritize key practices and be the most efficient in getting them into repertoires? Because we know the main things that matter. I think 10 years' time will give us that much more understanding of data systems. And this is, again, where the AI is going to be giant. Because today, teachers have good printouts. They have computer programs. Kids take assessments on the computer. The computer spits out the reports. Here's how they're doing, aggregate and individually. But in the very near future, the AI is going to say, this student is performing at this level and needs this intervention with this kind of instructional method specifically to address it. The feedback that teachers get is going to be personalized to students and their achievement in ways that we couldn't dream of doing without massive efforts now, but we're right on the cusp of it with the technology innovations, and all of that technology will mature in that time to make our jobs on some level easier, because some of these things that we'd like to do will be done for us. And then that will free us up to innovate in other ways.
Yes.
I think that the technology could take over some instruction for some kids in some instances.
Right.
I'm not trying to predict that that's going to come to pass.
Right.
But there will be those that push it.
Yeah.
You know, saying, hey, if we've got a teaching force that can't do the job,
right.
you know, the computer can. Let's give that a whirl. I think there's danger there.
Yes, for sure.
But innovation rarely stops to worry about things like that.
Yeah, we might have to do like a 5-year conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like AI is gonna.
Everything I just said, I think is on the 5-year horizon. 10 years, Skynet will have done its good work.
No, we're not going to dystopian. Not yet. Well, thank you, Michael, for taking some time today. I know your schedule is busy, and I really do. I would love to have you back and talk. I mean, really, much more recently, much sooner than 5 years, because I think some of these projects are gonna uncover some very cool stuff.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
You too. EdLab is a production of the University of Virginia School of Education and Human Development and WTJU 91.1 FM. EdLab is produced by Audrey Breen with support from Mary Garner McGee and Sage Tongwe. Our music is Palms Down by Blue Dot Sessions. You can subscribe to EdLab wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.